Most people assume that if you're the smartest person in the room, life gets easier. It doesn't. Often it gets lonelier. Talk to people who test in the top fraction of a percent, and you'll hear the same story again and again. Not everything clicked into place. More like, nobody around me thinks the way I do, and I've spent my whole life adjusting myself down so people don't feel it. That's not modesty. That's a coping strategy. And once you understand why extremely high intelligence creates that pattern, you'll understand something that has nothing to do with IQ tests and everything to do with how a mind that runs faster than the room around it learns to survive in it. Today, I want to break down what actually happens, psychologically, at the far end of the intelligence curve. Not the myth of the genius who effortlessly wins at life. The real pattern, the real cost, and the one mistake that keeps even brilliant people stuck. Here's the part almost nobody explains clearly. Intelligence isn't just more of the same thinking, faster. Past a certain point, it becomes a different mode of processing entirely. Someone with an average IQ solves a problem by working through it step by step. Someone at the extreme end often just sees the answer, the way you or I see that a red light means stop. No steps, no effort. It simply arrives. That sounds like an advantage, and mechanically it is, but it creates a very specific problem. They can't always show their work because there was no work to show. Teachers call it not applying themselves. Colleagues call it arrogance. What's actually happening is a mind that arrived at the destination before everyone else finished reading the map and has no idea how to explain the trip. The mistake most people make right here, before we even get to the harder parts, is assuming a faster mind is simply a better version of a normal one. It isn't better. It's differently wired, and different wiring comes with its own failure modes. If you're carrying a mind that processes this intensely, it's not just thoughts that come in faster. Everything does. Psychologists who study highly gifted individuals describe something called overexcitability, heightened intensity not only in thinking, but in emotion, in sensory experience, in imagination. A mildly awkward interaction that most people forget by lunch can replay in their head for a week, analyzed from 6 angles they didn't ask for. This is why so many people at the far end of the intelligence curve also report anxiety, restlessness, or a kind of chronic overthinking that looks, from the outside, like they're worrying about nothing. From the inside, it's not nothing. It's everything, arriving at full volume, all at once, with no dial to turn it down. The same wiring that lets them solve a problem in one leap also means a single offhand comment from a stranger can occupy real estate in their mind for days. It's the same processor. It doesn't have a setting for important versus unimportant. It just runs. Here's where it gets genuinely counterproductive. A highly intelligent mind doesn't just solve problems faster, it also generates more possible problems. Ask an average decision maker to pick a college, a career, a partner, and they'll weigh a handful of real factors and choose. Ask someone at the extreme end of the intelligence curve, and they'll often see 15 valid angles, several of which contradict each other, and all of which feel too important to ignore. This is where analysis paralysis comes from, and it's also where imposter syndrome quietly moves in. Because a mind that sees that many angles also sees, with total clarity, everything it doesn't yet know. Other people call that humility. It's actually just accuracy. They can see the edges of their own knowledge more precisely than anyone else in the room, which paradoxically makes them feel less certain, not more, exactly when everyone else assumes they should feel the most confident. The smarter the mind, the more it can see what's wrong with its own answer. That's not weakness. That's the mechanism working exactly as designed. It's just exhausting to live inside. So if the intellect itself isn't the problem, why do so many extremely high IQ people describe their lives as isolating? It comes down to something developmental psychologists call asynchronous development. A mind operating years, sometimes decades, ahead of same-age peers, doesn't get an emotional maturity upgrade to match. A 10-year-old who can out-argue most adults is still underneath it. A 10-year-old who wants a friend who gets the joke. That mismatch doesn't go away with age. It just changes shape. The adult version is a person who has learned. through years of blank stares and slightly too long silences, to simplify what they say before they say it. Not because they're hiding intelligence out of arrogance, but because they've learned that showing it at full strength makes other people uncomfortable, and discomfort ends conversations. So they edit themselves, constantly, and editing yourself in every conversation for years is exactly how a person ends up surrounded by people and still feels completely unseen. Before we get to the mistake, I want to be clear about something. Everything in the last 3 sections shows up, in a smaller dose, in plenty of people who are simply above average intelligent, not off the charts. Overexcitability, analysis paralysis, the instinct to simplify yourself so you don't make a room uncomfortable. These aren't exclusive to the top 0.1%. If you've ever dumbed down an idea mid-sentence because you watched someone's eyes glaze over, or spent 3 days replaying a comment nobody else remembers making, you already know this pattern from the inside. The extreme cases just make it easier to see the mechanism clearly. The mechanism itself is far more common than the label genius suggests. None of what we've covered requires a genius-level IQ to understand. It requires letting go of one assumption, that intelligence and well-being move in the same direction. The single biggest mistake made by gifted people and the people around them alike is treating smart as a synonym for fine. Assuming that a mind capable of solving hard problems must also be equipped to handle hard feelings. It isn't automatic. Processing power and emotional regulation are two completely different systems, and one does not upgrade the other for free. The people who actually thrive at the far end of the intelligence curve aren't the ones with the highest scores. They're the ones who eventually found a handful of people they didn't have to simplify themselves for, and who learned that being understood less often just means you have to seek it out more deliberately than everyone else does. So no, the smartest person in the room usually isn't having an easier time. She's just gotten very good at making it look that way. The loneliness was never really about the intelligence. It was about spending years translating yourself into a language everyone else could follow, and slowly forgetting that you were allowed to speak your own. That's really the whole difference, not intellect, translation. If this changed how you think about the smartest person you know, or maybe about yourself, stick around. Because next time, I'm going to break down exactly how highly intelligent people can find the people who don't need the translation at all.